Welcome to How to Cook That. I'm Ann Reardon and this is an episode of Cake Rescue, where we take viral cake fails from YouTube, TikTok and across the internet and show you how to rescue them. Let's start with cake number 1, the frog cake. This popular frog cake design and many similar ones came from Oracle Bakery in California. Mariola's sister loves frogs, so they are attempting to recreate the frog cake for her birthday. And you can see here Mariola is pouring buttercream on top of the cake that they made. Buttercream should not be thin like custard. This is a red flag already. Something is very wrong. Now, they did manage to spread this out as best as they could and even pipe some details around the edge that they said were drooping down. And their initial piping of the frog looks great, but once they left it for a couple of minutes, it totally collapsed. And in their own words,
we epically failed.
I'm going to start this rescue with the buttercream. I've got heaps of buttercream recipes for all different flavours on my website, and I'm just using the basic buttercream recipe today. Now, in this case, they wanted a dairy-free buttercream, so I'm going to use dairy-free margarine, which if you look at the ingredients, is just like normal margarine. It's made from vegetable oil. The only thing that's missing is the milk solids, which there wasn't heaps of anyway, so it's going to be very similar in behaviour to normal margarine in frosting. Now, to start with in this recipe, I like to have no liquid at all. And at this point, it looks so thick that most people pour in liquid. But I want you just to go with just the margarine and icing sugar, turn up the speed and wait. 1 minute later, and you get this. Look how beautiful and thick that frosting is. You could pipe it or put it on the side of a cake and it's not going to flop. It's not going anywhere. It will hold its shape. Now let me show you what will happen if I add to that 3 tablespoons of liquid. Keep in mind this is a big triple batch of buttercream, so that's just like adding 1 tablespoon to a single batch. After it's been whipped in, it's still firm, but it's not as good vertically as before. It's a little bit softer. Now let's add another 3 tablespoons of milk or milk alternative, whatever you're using, and whip that up. And you can see it's still okay, but it's definitely softer. It's a bit like a whipped cream consistency. It's not going to hold on the side of a cake. Now at this point, a lot of people think they can just thicken it up by adding more icing sugar to it. But in reality, you'd have to add the whole quantity of icing sugar you had for the recipe to thicken this up. Let me show you. After adding a whole extra cup of icing sugar, it's still a droopy frosting. Now I've added a little more milk into this now and some yellow colouring to get the custardy consistency that they had in their video. If you're trying to make frosting and it looks like this, I'd say just mix in some eggs, baking powder and flour and turn it into a cake. Make a new batch of frosting, in other words. Pipe on the frog and we have recreated the fail. To fix this, I would treat the initial thing as a really thin crumb coat. We are going to have to take off any excess sloppy icing that's on the cake or it's going to make everything fall off. If you were happy with the yellow, you could leave it as it is, but I've got a whole fresh batch of icing here, so I might as well put some on the cake. Now that we're using buttercream that has no liquid in it, you can see it is thick, it stays where I put it. You don't need a turntable to do this, you can just use a plate and spin it on your countertop and just use a knife with a flat edge to straighten it. Now onto the decorations. Don't pipe them directly onto the cake. Put some baking paper on a tray and we're just going to start with some little mushroom stems, just pipe and pull up. Then take a small amount of icing and colour it bright red and put the piping bag on top right in the middle, pressing down slightly and then squeeze to make the top of your mushroom. Now pipe more of these than you need, and then if you make some that flop over or that you don't like, it doesn't matter. You don't have to use those. You can choose your favourite ones because they're not actually on the cake yet. If yours are pointy on top like mine are, just wet your finger and pat it down a little bit. Pipe some tiny dots of white all around the top of your mushroom, and when you're done, just put that whole tray in the freezer. Grab another tray, line it with baking paper, and pipe a mound of green icing for your frog's body. Now use some acetate, or you could use some thin cardboard, and drag it up the sides to smooth it out. I really do think Mariola could have pulled this off if she had the right icing. And then just use a wet finger and flatten down the top. How you decorate the frog is up to you. I'm adding 5 little white dots for a flower. Then you need 2 green dots on top of the head for the eyes. This piping tip is a little bit small for this job. And then pipe on some arms. Definitely, if you had a slightly larger tip, it would look better. Use that. You will notice that I have more than one of these frogs, and that again is so I can choose the one that I like the best at the end. Why not? But if you are a bakery, you can see it would make sense for them to make trays and trays of these at once, and then they can just put them on the cakes when someone orders a cake. Once you've piped on the details, put the whole tray in the freezer for at least an hour. Once the decorations are frozen, you can pick them up and position them where you want them on the cake. Now, if you hold these in your hands, obviously they are going to melt, so be quick about it while you're holding it. Use your leftover frog green icing to pipe some little reeds around the top of the cake, and then with the leftover white, pipe some extra little flowers like the one the frog is holding. Choose your favourite frog and put it near the edge of the cake on one side, and then just pipe on a couple of little legs for him. And you have yourself a rescued frog cake. No one would even know that it started with a fail. Now for cake number 2, the boyfriend cake. Molly wants to make her boyfriend a thoughtful, handmade birthday gift, so she's ordered a custom cake topper and is making him a cake. Now, by her own admission, she cannot bake, so she is starting with 2 store-bought cakes, which is totally fine. It's good to know your limitations. She does realise that this is not straight, so she makes some adjustments and accidentally breaks a chunk off the top of the cake, and I'll let Molly take it from here.
The next step is the icing. I have tons of this red Play-Doh looking substance. A little bit of flour. Just gonna warm it up in my hands a bit first. That now it's covered in the flour marks, but I think it'll be fine because I'm gonna decorate it anyway, so let's see what I can do. Whoa, hold the phone. It's like putting a little outfit on it. I'm getting the cake dressed. Hi Tom, happy 21st. I know we were meant to have just got back from Bali, but here's a really good substitute present that's the worst thing you've ever seen in your life. Please don't sign me up for Bake Off. It really is not what I saw on Pinterest. It's really, really not. No matter which way I turn this, it doesn't improve. Like, got this ridge in it. Oh, it's just not good, is it? Like,
You've been run over.
I'm not done yet. What's the matter with it?
It looks like a flat tire.
I don't know how to make it better. I don't think I can make it better.
Okay, let's recreate the fail using 2 store-bought iced chocolate cakes and a dash of store-bought icing. Now, mistake number 1 was assuming that the fondant would make the cake look good. So you want to make sure the lumps and bumps under there are the ones that you want to be showing the world. Second mistake was the flour. Don't roll your fondant out with flour, it will stick to it and dry out the fondant. The third problem was piping on store-bought frosting. It is really soft. It's not ideal for piping because it's just going to droop down, which is exactly what happened on her cake. Now to rescue it. Well, personally, I wouldn't touch it because it was a gift from her to her boyfriend. She's put in a lot of effort. She's even ordered a custom cake topper with his name on it, and I think it's special. But if she wanted to fix it and she had a spare half an hour, this is what I'd tell her to do. Take the topper off and keep it safe. Pull the flour covered fondant off. She said she bought lots of this, so let's just get rid of it. The flour's going to make it taste weird and it doesn't look good, so we'll just get rid of that bit. The top cake is split and cracked and broken, so I'm going to remove that one off the top. The bottom one is a whole cake. That's not broken at all, so I'm going to use that one for the top. By using the broken one on the bottom, it has the support of the baseboard and it's less likely to fall apart. But we do not want it domed. It needs to be flat before we add another cake on top. Now, her frosting was set a lot firmer than this one, so for that you just use a hot knife and then just cut through the frosting. The hotter it is or the warmer it is, the softer it is. So once you've taken it off the cake, you can actually microwave it for a few seconds to make it softer and then use it on the cake. Add the cake that's not broken on top, and now use the chocolate icing that was salvaged off the cake to smooth out the sides. She also had that soft store-bought icing, which is really not ideal for this function at all, but I need a little bit more frosting, so I'll use some of that just to help fill in all the gaps so that it's not going to have any lumps and bumps that we don't want. It won't have sharp corners at the top like a perfectly covered cake, but it will be fine. Ideally for this cake, I would make a batch of red buttercream and not use fondant at all, but she is limited to store-bought items only, nothing homemade, so I'm sticking to those rules. Now grab the fondant and give it a squeeze. If it's too hard, you can microwave it, but just do it for 5 seconds at a time. You don't want to make it liquid. This one is okay consistency. Place it onto some baking paper so it doesn't stick to your counter, and then spray it with some vegetable oil. This is just canola cooking oil. Using oil helps stop it stick to the rolling pin, and it also helps stop the fondant from drying out while you're working with it. Then you want to roll that out into one big circle. Use the baking paper to help you pick that up and flip it over onto the cake. Now I know it looks like this doesn't fit, but from here you just have to lift and lower, lift and lower. Press it onto the cake around the top where there are no folds, and then just keep lifting and lowering around the base and gently pressing it onto the cake. Once it gets down to the lower area, cut off some of that excess and continue lifting and lowering until it's smooth on the cake. Use a knife to trim that excess fondant from around the base. And now instead of piping on that soft frosting, I'm going to use some compound white chocolate. Just microwave that for 30 seconds, stir and repeat until it's melted. Then put it into a Ziploc bag and cut off a tiny corner. Starting on the top of the cake, near the edge but not right on the edge, pipe a line of chocolate and then pipe it a little bit more just in sections, letting it slowly go towards the edge. Now you can always go back and add more if you need it, and so that you can have the drips wherever you want them on the cake. Add the happy birthday back in the center and cover the top with strawberries and chocolates just like it was on the Pinterest one she saw. Now for cake number 4, chocolate glaze. I'm not actually sure what happened to cake number 3. Apparently I've forgotten how to count, but now that I've animated the title with number 4, we're just going to go with it. Andrea is having a lot of trouble with this glaze. When you glaze a dessert, the dessert needs to be frozen so that the glaze sets quickly when you pour it over, and you also can't have the glaze too hot or it will melt a layer of the dessert and just slide off, which is initially what I thought was going on here. That was until I realised she's trying to glaze an ice cream cake. Now, ice cream, as you know, melts at room temperature, so even a slightly warm glaze is going to melt a layer of ice cream and it will slide off. If you want to glaze an ice cream cake, you're going to need to cover the cake in a layer of something that isn't totally liquid at room temperature. A ganache made from cream and chocolate is perfect for this. Freshly made ganache is warm and too runny for our purposes, so what you want to do is pour it into a Ziploc bag, then seal up the top and flatten it out and just put it in the freezer for about 30 minutes. After which time it won't be frozen, but it will have cooled enough that it's thick enough to spread it up the sides of a silicone baking mould. Keep going, keep spreading it out until the whole thing is covered in a thin layer of ganache. Get the ice cream out of the freezer so it can soften, and turn the freezer down as cold as it will go. Choose some chocolate bars that you want to go inside your ice cream cake and chop those up. Now scoop the soft ice cream into the ganache-lined mould. Squash it down and then add the chocolates on top. Now add a layer of different ice cream, and you just want to level that off at the top and put it in the freezer overnight so it can set really firm. For the glaze, put some cream into a bowl, and this recipe is on my website for you. Then just add the sugar and the water. Microwave that until the sugar is dissolved, then add the cocoa powder, the glucose syrup, and the bloomed gelatin and stir it really well. Finally, we want to pour that through a sieve to make sure it's free of any lumps. And then we're just going to cover that and leave it at room temperature. The next day when we're ready to use it, it looks like this. It's set. Now we want to warm it up slightly to make it liquid, but it shouldn't feel hot. So it should be about the temperature of your hand. So it shouldn't feel hot or cold on your hand. If you, in the process of melting it in the microwave, have made it too hot, you're going to have to leave it to cool down. Once you're ready, ladle it over the frozen ganache-covered ice cream cake. You're going to want to make sure you add enough of that glaze for it to cover all the sides. You don't want any gaps, just keep scooping it on. And then you just have to wait about a minute for that dripping to slow down as the gelatin in the glaze sets. And once the drips just stop, you can scrape it off around the bottom and transfer it onto a cold plate. And then you just put that back in the freezer because it's an ice cream dessert, and make your freezer not so cold so that you can cut it when it's time to serve it. Cake number 5 is the sweet shop cake. Now this cake started out so well. It was a joint effort between Caitlin and her daughter for her daughter's birthday. The cake itself was baked beautifully, the frosting looked good, doing so well, decorating with lollies was fantastic, and the finished cake looks great. And then
it smashed, didn't it, Amy? It just collapsed while we're waiting for people to arrive.
Last minute cake fails don't give you much time to work. I mean, the guests are already there. Let's recreate the fail and see what we can do. I'm baking my almond and blueberry cake for the base, and I'm using a packet cake for the back because it'll be a little bit firmer than a nice soft moist cake would be. Decorate the cake with frosting and lollies all around it. And now I need to add the back into place. As a general rule, if you ever go more than 2 layers of cake high, you need to add support. If you want to know how to do that, watch my SpongeBob cake tutorial. That's a tall, slim cake, and you will know how to do that. I don't want to wait for mine to collapse. It will collapse because it's only cake. It won't stand up on its side for long, but I'm just going to give it a shake to speed up the process. Now, if I had just arrived at this party, I would love to have rescued this for them. The mum in the original video has 5 kids and is currently going through cancer treatment, and I'm amazed that she had energy to make a birthday cake at all. Well done. Please do go check out her vlogs and send her some encouragement in your prayers. What a champion. I'll link to her channel below. Now that this has fallen once, it is going to be even more unstable than it was before. So to sort of quickly rescue it, I'm going to push 2 plastic straws down into the cake. Ideally it needs a lot more support than this, but the guests are already there, so it really just needs a quick fix to make it last just for a few minutes while you sing happy birthday. For any damaged areas, I'm going to get some icing just from the back of the cake where no one can see, and use it to fix the front of the cake. Use a knife just to neaten it up and take off any frosting that's in the wrong places. And for this little cake decoration, we're just going to get rid of the top of it that's covered in frosting and put it back where it was. And if there's a spare lolly, just pop that on top if you've got one. Even though it's standing, the back still looks a bit sad. So I've printed out a sign and stuck it on some cardboard so that the oil from the buttercream doesn't just soak into it as quickly. And then just going to push that into place. When a cake collapses at the last minute, there really is not a lot you can do to rescue it, but do keep smiling. It is just cake. At the end of the day, it's still going to taste good, and it really doesn't matter. With thanks to my amazing patrons for your support, I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed this video, let the algorithm know that you did by liking, commenting, subscribing, and watching another episode. Make it a great week by being kind to others, and I'll see you next Friday.